You ready? All right. Is this on? I guess it is. You can hear me. Everybody can hear me. All right. I think we will go ahead and call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Go to our agenda. First thing we're going to do tonight is public input. You have the list. Thank you. I guess first what I'll do is we have an email from Ralph Fellers that he asked to be read, and he said he couldn't be here, asked to be read in. Said, when I initiated to the city my desire to develop our 32 acres, I was told there would be no alternatives to the city master plan. I didn't oppose anything the city required, even though it added expense and was detrimental to the project's profitability. 2-acre lots, no simple concrete turnaround. It had to be a circle drive with landscaping, and the future development property to our south must be accessible by a side street. By the way, he's talking about Quiet Hills, for those of you who don't know it. Trail ride drive. Our development did it all according to the city's demand at well over 100,000 in hard costs 7 years ago, not even considering the greater income we could have had by that 1-acre lot sale, by 1-acre lot sales. I'm not opposed to the development next door. I'm aware that the city elections change the ideas for the city. However, the spirit of the master plan and getting the utmost ambiance for our community should be consistent. One small example, a quote, dead-end trail ride drive, unquote, to satisfy the developer's desire for, quote, a higher profitability, unquote. That's from Ralph Fellers. So we've got a number of people who wanted to speak tonight on the public input. So I guess our first contestant here is Brian Toms from Quiet Hill Circle. Now we're going to try and limit these to 3 minutes unless there's just huge demand, and then we'll give everybody however much the huge demand is. But could you come up to the microphone here so we can record it, please? State your name and your address, and then your comments, and Sheila will time you for the 3 minutes.
Sure. Brian Toms, 135 Quiet Hill Circle. So I live on some land that it borders the proposed development. So my back fence line is basically the north side of the Ani Ranch proposed development. And I'm actually speaking in support of the development. The key for us, I think, is that those lot lines on that along that fence line remain 2 acres, which is what I think the current proposal is, although I haven't sort of seen the updates here tonight. So I think for us, it's that it's keeping that as 2 acres. I also border that trail ride lane road that Ralph was referencing. And while it's sort of annoying that that road is there, my preference is clearly not to connect it because that would create a lack of privacy, more through traffic through there, et cetera. So, I think for us, the sort of our key preferences are that it doesn't get connected, that it remains 2 acres along that fence line, and that fence line is something tasteful. Like right now, it's a barbed wire fence. Ideally, it stays that if it's sort of a natural view and that the trees are kept and things like that. But if it's not, that there could be some input from us, ideally on something that's sort of mutually acceptable. So I'll keep it short. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Our next speaker is Dean Hartley. You could take the microphone and give us your address, name and address.
I'm Dean Hartley. I'm speaking for the Hartley family. We're at 1320, 1340, and 1360 Copper Canyon Road, directly across the street from this development. I'm in opposition to reducing it below the R2 planning that we've already got in place zoning. We're already getting the runoff on that property now over on mine, and I really don't need any more coming off of it. So that's a concern of ours, is of course the traffic on Copper Canyon Road, which we already have, and then the flood or water retention and how it's controlled on their side.
Not to prompt you, but do you have any comment on the 2 roads coming out towards your property?
No, my only concern is because living there and watching it, there's a crest of 2 hills right there where those are going to come out. And there's always, I mean, after high school lets out, don't get on that road for a while. You know, I mean, people passing between those two hills right there. And it's, I like to call it I-35M. It's the middle one. It's not the east one. It's not the west one. It's the one in the middle. So traffic probably is a concern, and where those entrance and exits are located would probably stand some looking at as far as safety.
Thank you, Dean. And next is our perennial contestant, Ted Stranzik.
Thank you all. And I want to, since I'm also an alternate on the P&Z, I want to make it clear that these are comments made by a citizen and not in any way an official capacity with the P&Z. Number one, I like the project. But number two, there's a lot of shortfalls. And I'd like to call out some of those shortfalls for your consideration. First, I'd like to address the council from the standpoint, or I should say the commission, from the standpoint that this planned development concept, it's really an ordinance that allows people to violate all of our ordinances. And I don't think it's a ordinance and it's a concept that we should continue. We should look at that and modify it or eliminate it. I don't see it doing any good for this town. And once you lower a standard, it sets a precedent for that standard to be continually lowered by other developments. When we look at the 2-acre development, the 2 acres in the development, and then you go 1.5 acres and you go 1 acre, it's a nice concept. But in earlier meetings, I think the signal was given that it should be more 2 acres. And I would suggest that you look at that plan to make more than 2 acres from what you presently have presented. Also, the horseshoe entrance. You guys have, it's going to be some expensive homes. And every development I've seen now, you're in one and out the other. Is there something else you can do to make it more creative? And I just asked the question. When it comes to the gas well that's there, it's kind of avoided. It's an eyesore right now. It's going to be there. And I think you ought to consider making part of that a green space. Make it something that contributes to the value of this development and in a way that enhances what's going on. You haven't called out where the location of the detention and retention plan is, but maybe you can combine that in that area there. The other thing that concerns me about those wells is we've had complaints. I've heard complaints from other residents around oil wells, and I heard one again today, that there's a lot of noise when those trucks come to service it and do whatever is they need to do on that particular property. I think careful consideration needs to be done as to limit that noise travel into the development in some form and fashion. Right now, it looks kind of trashy. The buildings are falling down. I know that's going to be improved, but it's something that I think you ought to look at. When it comes to green space, we don't have enough of it in this town when we do our developments. We chop down all the trees, we dig up all the dirt, and then we plant 1 or 2 trees. You suggest that in your program, and I think you ought to look deeper into that. And if we can't save any of the big trees, we ought to. You can GPS locate any tree on there and apply it to your lot plans and maybe save that big tree over there, whereas in the past you knocked them all down. And unfortunately, that's what we've been doing in the past. As far as the proposal that you put forth, I guess you're going to be an HOA. I don't know that, but it's indicated there. I'd like to have that clarified. Also, are you going to be a gated community or not? There's some proposals in here for, under the plan development, that alter our existing requirements and ordinances. And I'm not going to go into any detail, but there's revisions to lots, spacing of homes on lots and masonry requirements. You call out a 2-car garage, but I'd like to point out that it would be very desirable to have no garage facing a street and have that as a point of contention. The other thing I think was mentioned about a fence that I think is very important that we put in the proper fence to complement 2 very nice areas. Quiet Hill is a beautiful establishment, and any kind of transition in there should be carefully looked at and get their cooperation in the process. Again,
3 minutes.
okay.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much, Council.
All right. Is there anyone else that has not signed in that would like to speak in this opening? Now, we will have more opportunity to speak later, and we'll also hear from the developer later, but for right now.
Yeah, I signed up. I emailed the last one.
Okay. Fred, would you like to?
Right. I'm Fred Barber. I'm at 120 Quiet Hill Circle, which is right here. Brian and Adriana are here. Ralph Fellers, who sent in the email, is right there. So we border this development on the north side. I'm speaking actually in my capacity as president of the Quiet Hill HOA. I have some of my own personal opinions, but what I've tried to do this week is gather everybody's opinion from the entire street so we can present kind of a unified position. Overall, we like it. We are overall in support of the development. We think that I actually really appreciate the developer communicating with us a lot, asking our input, designing something we think will be quite tasteful and will overall not only benefit the north side of the town, but benefit our street specifically. The concerns we had with 2+ acre lots bordering our community have been met. There's a limited number of 1 acre lots on the west and southwest corner backing to Lantana. Fundamentally, we don't have a problem with that. The way in which this community transitions. A couple points, questions, and concerns that we have. As Brian mentioned, the border fence. Right now, it's just plain old barbed wire. We have a pipe rail fence at the front of our neighborhood bordering Copper Canyon Road. If that or something like that could be continued along the north side, so it architecturally tie in, it also allows the free movement of wildlife. Lantana put up a big 6-foot tall solid fence so the deer and everything else can't go through there anymore. We used to get deer, foxes, all kinds of things. And there is still a fair amount of wildlife. So something that allowed that to migrate through there, we think would be helpful. The second thing, to Ralph Feller's point, trail ride lane. Now, we don't have the overall consensus of our neighborhood is nobody really wants to see that built through, certainly at this time. But the whole point of that from town planning, fire, and so on was that second mode of ingress egress eventually is beneficial or would be beneficial. Let's say there's a fire at the front of the neighborhood, tornado, wildfire, construction like we had today. We couldn't get out of there today for a good chunk without waiting 15, 20 minutes. So having that second mode of at least an easement to, if we curtail that now, it could never be done. Also, we could never be a gated community without a second mode of egress. Right now, we're not, but there's at least 2 people in our neighborhood who would like eventually to have that ability. Without that street, we couldn't. So that's a concern. But again, we are not, the consensus for our neighborhood right now is we don't want to see that built through day one. We don't want the construction traffic and so on. Third point is, trees, as Mr. Stranzik mentioned, there's some beautiful mature oaks and elms back in there. Any of those that could be tagged and marked and prevented from removal, we would really, really appreciate. We have the same design standards, no garage faces the street. without a variance and so on. So having that architectural similarity and preserving those trees, or if a tree had to be removed for a building, the only practical building site, having it replaced with, a decent caliper tree in that backyard facing our neighborhood would be, typically the tree requirement is only in the front yard. But if you're going to remove trees that currently we have a view of that create that neighborhood feeling, we'd like that to be preserved. That's it. Thank you.
Fred. Anyone else we might have overlooked? And again, there will be another public input time a little later on in the agenda tonight. All right. So for that, I'd like to move on just to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. In this first item, we will have time for public input afterwards, but I do want to make clear what action item number 1 is, which is also public hearing item number 1. For those of you who lived with us last year, we had a major initiative to clean up the town's accessory building regulations. That was much discussed in the public. There was a bunch of discussion. P&Z had several meetings on it. The changes were approved. Council approved them. They went to the attorney drafted them all in. But one of the points that I made after that is that he changed the regulation, but there were several other little points throughout the regulations that were not in conformity with the new. This section tonight is only a conforming change. It is not anything new. It is what's been approved before. It's now just putting it in the right spot in the regulations. So again, people are willing to speak on it, but there's really no point. All we're doing is conforming to what has already been approved. There's nothing unique and different about this particular thing that we're going to talk about tonight. We just need to approve it, to send it to council, so council can get the regulations all to sync up together. So that's number 1. And then I'll read these in detail later when we get to them. And the second one, of course, is to talk about what we're talking about here, the request to amend the comprehensive zoning ordinance and zoning map of the town of Copper Canyon by amending the grant a change in zoning from residential to R2 to planned development on approximately 55.75 acres and to allow for the development of approximately 27 single-family lots, 14 2 acres, 7 1.5 acres, 6 1 acre lots located at 1313 Copper Canyon Road, Argyle, Texas, 76226, providing the concept plan and development standards and regulations. My only critique there, Sheila, is it should say Copper Canyon instead of Argyle. It's the right zip code, but it's the wrong town. I would gladly give it to them, but I'm sorry, we can't. Okay, so our first consent item is to approve the September 26 minutes of our commission meeting. Were there any comments on those minutes, corrections, or changes? Hearing none, I'd accept a motion to approve.
Make a motion.
Second. Second. All right. All in favor? All approved. Okay, so now we move on to first action item, which now I'm required to read, so bear with me. Discuss and consider and make recommendation to the Copper Canyon Town Council regarding amending the Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 14, quote unquote, zoning, Exhibit 14A, quote unquote, zoning ordinance, Article 2, quote unquote, general district zoning regulations, Section 2-102, quote unquote, use, yard, and bulk requirements by amending Section A, quote unquote, use groups, chart by amending, quote unquote, accessory dwelling guest house from uses permitted as conditional uses to expressly permitting and amending, quote unquote, caretaker guards residence to expressly permitted by amending Chapter 14, quote unquote, zoning, Exhibit 14A, quote unquote, zoning ordinance, Article 4, quote unquote, supplementary provisions, Section 4-116, quote unquote, buildings on the same lot by amending Section B, by amending Chapter 14, quote unquote, zoning, Exhibit 14A, zoning ordinance, quote unquote, Article 11, quote unquote, definitions, Section 11-102, quote unquote, words and terms by amending Section C1 and all matters incident and related thereto. So as boring as that is, does anybody have any comments? I'm required to ask. Thank you. Hearing none, I would accept a motion to approve this.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Thank you. Second, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, now we come to the more exciting business. This is action item number 2, which I read earlier, to discuss, consider, and make recommendation to Copper Canyon Town Council regarding a request to amend the comprehensive zoning ordinance and zoning map of the town of Copper Canyon, Texas, by amending to grant a change in zoning from residential 2 R2 to planned development on approximately 55.75 acres, and to allow for the development of approximately 27 single-family lots, 14 2 acres, 7 1.5 acres, 6 1 acre lots, located at 1313 Copper Canyon Road, Copper Canyon, Texas, providing the concept plan and development standards and regulations and all matters incident and related thereto. So I think the way to approach this first is the developer is here tonight. If you would like to make a presentation and talk a little bit, and if you feel like it, address some of the other points that were raised here. We'll start there, and then we'll open it again for public comments based on what you hear from the developer. Oh.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for being here and the public for coming out. My name is Craig Calhoun with Sweet Cow Holdings. We are the developer for the Ani Ranch proposed project that you have in front of you. And I would love to address some of the comments. Just to give you kind of a brief overview. We have been since the summer of 2022 in discussions with the city. We had a pre-development meeting with the mayor and staff, just briefly to propose what we were considering at the time, which was a much higher density of development than what you see before you today. And that was the idea behind that was shut down immediately. The concept of us tying into Lantana Sewer and putting in 132 houses didn't go very far with your current mayor. And he made that very clear that he would not be able to support such a proposal, as well as he didn't anticipate support from P&Z and council. So we revamped our proposal, came back with a much less dense proposal of 31 lots, which we did bring that forward to a development review committee meeting, which had a representative of P&Z and I believe a council member as well, and staff. And we received additional feedback, which was, at that point, we were at 1.86 gross dwellings or gross acres per dwelling. And we ended up having to cut back more lots. At that point, we cut off 4 lots to the development to get it to now what is a gross density of 2.06 acres per dwelling on this 55-acre tract. And so that's where we're at today, is the opportunity to review this plan development that we have proposed. Would be in our review of any development in Copper Canyon over the last 5 years that has more than 15 lots or homes in that development. This would be the largest lot development over 15 homes that has been approved by the town in the last 5 years. So I appreciate the comments that this is degrading where the town's been going. But if you look at the historical from the last 5 years, and there's a little chart that I provided earlier that was printed out, I think, for some of the council members. Now, those are my numbers pulled off of plats that I have reviewed from everything from the beloved Vickery Estates to Boots Ranch to Copper Canyon Estates, or Copper Creek Estates, I should say, as well as the most recent Williams Ranch, which I understand is part of your town zoning development. So yeah, it's on the last page. Just real quickly, I'll try to address some of the comments from the public relative to, I would love to thank, I want to thank Quiet Hill HOA. They have been very cooperative and given us both critical feedback and good feedback. We had a neighborhood meeting with them and have had many follow-up conversations. So I appreciate their feedback. It is important that we make good neighbors. We are relative to the fence line and the look and the maintaining continuity along Copper Canyon, we understand that Quiet Hill Estates has some leftover materials that would lend itself to us continuing that. It would be our desire to try to make continuity there on the front so that we have a nice looking fence line along Copper Canyon Road. And as far as the north side of the property, which would be the part in question tonight that is currently a barbed wire fence, we're open to considerations on that. We just want to make sure we're in compliance with the town's regulations, which with the limited amount of PD language we have, it's open, everything else defaults to what is currently in the town ordinances, which you have a very open fence policy. We would have to ask, if we wanted to put a 6-foot cedar fence up like Lantana did, it wouldn't fly with the current ordinances as I understand it. So we are open to making that fence line on the north side something attractive and animal friendly, I guess we should say. As far as the drainage is concerned, we have Cody Crannell here from CCM Engineering representing our engineers tonight. They do a very thorough job. They have to make sure that the drainage is going to be in compliance. We decided on a double entry, even though by law, I guess, according to the fire code, if you have under 30 homes, you really only need one entrance to the neighborhood. We have 2 entrances. So, so we've tried to make sure we've met those requirements. The gas well, part of the reason why we went from a DRC meeting in August or September all the way to now in 2023 is because we've been waiting for that gas lease surface area to be defined by BRG Energy. And it is now defined. It is a 5-acre piece. Currently fenced off, what you'll see is about 2.5 to 3 acres. But they have the rights to a full 5 acres, which cannot be developed by us. It's a great idea to put green space in there, but it has to be, it's under their jurisdiction. So, so that area has been worked into the neighborhood so that we have enough buffer zones for their current gas wellheads to be able to allow building on the larger lots that we're proposing. As far as the entrance, there is a concept plan of a monument entrance for the Ani Ranch. We do, in homage to the Ani family, you'll see a J and an A on the brand with the circle. That is in reference to the Janet Ani legacy. We'd like to try to carry that forward. She's been there for a very long time and part of this community, a former P&Z member, I believe. So, so that's in reference to the branding of the neighborhood. As far as trees, Mrs. Ani actually planted a grove of trees, and in your satellite image, I think it's your second page of the handout, you'll see that the street crosses over that grove in one little section, but that the beauty is that the backyards of 4 of the big lots in the center of the community will actually preserve those trees, that grove of trees in their backyards, which turned out nicely. I would love to say it was completely by design, but it actually worked out that way. And in reference to the other trees in the neighborhood, we would definitely prefer to preserve as much as we can. And with a large lot development like this, it's much, much easier than going in and wiping them all out to cram a bunch of homes in. We understand that trees do not grow quickly. And so keeping the older mature trees is definitely a goal of the development. We do intend on there being an HOA. We do not currently have plans to have this be a gated community. We want it to be an open community, both streets open. That may change. There's an option for that. As far as specifying no garages facing the street, that's the first time this has been brought forward to us. I think it's a reasonable proposal that we would consider. It's not part of our current PD language, but if that's felt like it's a very necessary item, then that's something we would consider. I think that addresses most everything except for maybe this trail ride road, the connection to the dead end road that exists on the Quiet Hill HOA. Currently, it lines up with the property boundaries of two of our properties on the northwest corner of the development. If we were to grant a fire access easement, could it be done? Yes. Would we prefer not to have to do that? I think we would prefer not to have to if necessary. But if the town is asking for it, then that is something that we will have to do. Any questions for me?
But I'd like to just, in the interest of transparency here, I think maybe we'll hear some more from the public and we will give you a chance
Sure.
to come back and respond to anything new that comes up.
Yeah,
If that's okay.
you bet. Thank you.
So before we go back onto the public input, I guess I would like to hear from our town engineer, Chris Harkey, because he had some comments on this, which may be responsive to some of the points you made.
Okay, yep. There was some back and forth on emails to address a few of the comments. I think some of the ones to still discuss more is definitely related to detention. I know there's that small easement and there's been talk about either maintaining or creating a new pond kind of centrally located. Either way, however that's going to work and however that's going to outfall from the property, doesn't seem like that's been thoroughly vetted yet. If you need to have easements back there, how you're going to get the water to move to the east or wherever it needs to go. The easements, the large TP&L easements, just making sure that as those go across a couple of those properties pretty heavily, the setbacks and everything are there to concur with the actual minimum lot size that you're looking to achieve and not interfering with those easements. The other one is with that well site, how is the PD potentially going to address that remaining as a well site in not now a residential area, but a planned development area? I'd like to see some language in the ordinance for how that would be achieved if P&Z decides to move forward in that direction. And then actually that was the last one. So I think everything else that we've kind of discussed back and forth has been addressed. from
Right,
my
so
perspective.
in honor of Ted's transit, I'll ask another question. Right now, according to Dean, we're already seeing too much runoff from Lantana crossing the road. So to what degree is this developer responsible for not only replacing his hard space on his property, but solving our other problems of the water that's already crossing his property? Is he responsible for that, or is there any requirement?
Any offsite directly from Lantana that today flows through his property is allowed to continue to flow through his property at that same Q value or same flow. Anything more that is added based on rooftops and everything else, the developer will be required to detain.
All right. So again, to just be clear that, we've got a lot of drainage problems in this town. Ted has been a bear on following up on those. But to the extent you could help out with Mr. Hartley across the road, he'd probably appreciate it. To the extent that you design your drainage, you're not required to, but some gesture in that direction would be nice. Any other comments, Chris?
Well, no, and you've made a good point is the drainage does want to get back to Copper Canyon, and how and where it hits that is going to be part of the major design as you move forward.
All right, we have a representative of the fire department here tonight.
Yes, sir.
Could you mind coming up here? We can ask you a couple of questions too,
Yes, sir.
which he's totally unprepared for. He was just here. Like, we should give him the list of questions in advance. Maybe people have other questions other than me. One of the things that, and this may precede your time with the fire group, Quiet Hills, when they were, as one of our first people here mentioned, the town was required to spend quite a bit of money to build trail ride lane as a fire exit. And as we've also heard, it prevents them from being a gated community. That is their second exit. And I suppose they could, in the event of a disaster, they could tear down the barbed wire fence and cut across that property. Going forward, if there's going to be a house and whatnot there, first of all, how does the fire department look at Quiet Hills if they know that that road will never be a fire thing and now limited to one exit? My understanding is that violates what the town agreed to and Quiet Hills agreed to, is so that they could have two exits. by us doing something on the property to the south, we are permanently, unless some other option is made, we're permanently denying that a second fire exit, and that's limited them to one exit, which we heard is maybe not preferable. Some people like it, some people don't. So can you talk to us about how the fire department looks at the two exit issue?
So with the two exit issues here we're having, the IFC with the International Fire Codes states that any development which has under 30 homes will only require one egress. Second will always be a positive. But if that trail we're talking about, that's something Quiet Hill has put in place, and the town has adopted that and they want that in there, we're not opposing to it at all. But as far as fire side, we only require one. That's based off the book. And that's the code we follow.
So interestingly, if you were to take the 27 lots here and how many in Quiet Hills? How many?
11.
Now, granted, they're separate developments, but they are side by side. That's over 30 combined. Now, again, it seems like, well, anyway, that's just a thought to plant in people's minds.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's still, because they're two separate developments, you can't combine them. If you're going to combine them, then every future developments that connects, now we're saying, well, we don't have 30 homes. Now it's 5,000. Why don't we have these many entrances or exits? So we can't do so. So we base everything on developments. If that development has 30 homes, you require to have 2. If the next one comes in and has 28, you're required to have 1. But more the better.
Great, thank you.
Anything else I can answer?
Anybody else have any questions that are fire related? Committee?
Yes, sir. As far as 1 versus 2? Well, I think we're in the process of planning now. The growth is just phenomenal right now throughout the North Texas area. Denton County Emergency Services District 1, we cover approximately 60 square miles. So we don't service just one town, but we have Lantana, we got North Lake, Argyle, Bartonville, Corral City, and Copper Canyon. We're in the process of hiring more now. Everything takes money. So, but we are trying our best to keep up with the pace. That's an ongoing. All the time, I know they have meetings all the time requesting for more equipment, more money, but it's all down to the tax dollars. So we are working out our best, but yes, it is, the growth is just phenomenal right now.
They have had difficulties along with police departments everywhere else hiring. It's a very difficult time to hire first responders. So they're challenged just in the marketplace. All right, thank you. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir.
Let's see. I guess what we can do now is we can open it up again for public comment. If anybody has any comment from what they've heard from the developer or the fire or the engineers, any other comments? Ted?
The issue of the gas wells, as I understand what.
Okay, Ted, could you do, sorry, we record these things for future entertainment value.
As I understand what was presented, you don't have any control over the gas wells. Is that correct?
Over the surface rights on that 5 acres is for BRG Energy.
So you have nothing to say about that property? You can't tell them to put up a fence, you can't tell them to control noise or truck traffic or anything else?
They have to comply with all of their regulations. I don't know if I completely know the answer to that question, and it's great details, but it would not be, it's not, the rights are not ours to control it. Do
you have a good look?
It's an active gas well. They anticipate will be active for 25 years, according to DRG, a minimum of 25 more years.
Well, that's good for everyone. I don't have a problem with it, with that. I still have a problem with the fact that there's going to be noise. And what are the controlling factors for all the residents?
Prospective residents. Prospective residents.
Yes, I'm sorry, prospective residents. And that would be my question.
Thank you, Ted. Right.
Thanks a lot. So just want to follow up a little bit of some of the things that Craig was talking about earlier regarding the architectural standards, the lack of forward facing garages. I just want to make sure that it's noted, we've shared our covenants with the developer as well as the bylaws of our HOA. So there's an interest in coordinating on that. That is established in our covenant that you can have no forward facing garages. We've made some exceptions like Brian's house that the only way you could do it was with a garage facing trail ride lane, the now 40-foot wide driveway to his house. Right. It's side facing on the front of the house, facing towards that side street. We are in the process of revising our covenants for some other issues that have come up recently in the town related to things like light pollution, landscape lighting, very bright Kelvin temperature lights. I think cold is the correct term for Kelvin. The town doesn't have really good, you have engineering standards for street lights, but there's nothing we found in the town ordinances that relate to residential lighting. And we have had complaints from Lantana and from our neighborhood about a couple houses that put up very bright exterior lights. So that would be something that would be great to have codified in better form by the town, as well as covenanted within the HOAs as to, bright white LED lights didn't exist 10 years ago when a lot of these neighborhoods, and so nobody thought to say you can't have lights above a certain Kelvin temperature. Now we need to do that. Another issue is solar panels that are visible from the road. A lot of people find those distasteful. So it'd be good to codify that solar panels can only be in the back of a house. So things like that. And again, we've had good communication and cooperation so far. I would trust if they establish an HOA would initially be developer controlled, but we would want to try to mirror the covenant agreements between the two neighborhoods to be consistent architecturally and design wise.
Great, and I do appreciate you volunteering to lead up that committee on the lighting. Make a note. We've got our chairman. Chris, did you have any comments on either the solar panels or the lighting? No.
No, just I agree.
Thought you would.
But the solar panels is kind of a key issue within the town, both roof mounted and ground mounted, and some of the other factors that need to be considered.
Some of these issues, we're a small town. We kind of been accreting regulations as we grow and as problems come up. And these are two recent issues that just weren't there when we formed the town and set up the regulations. So again, thank you.
I will say, speaking of gas wells, they operate BRG. We have our ordinances with the town, and they operate under the Texas Railroad Commission, and they don't have really any interaction with what's built around them. Our communities can't say you go in and put some kind of landscaping in.
And didn't we just do something with noise distances? That's for all new wells. Sorry, that's new wells, right? We can't put in wells that are going to have noise levels over certain things within the risk of existing houses. Doesn't affect older ones. I guess what we can turn to then is having talked go through sorry, Kim?
I do have a question.
Sure.
So this is pretty remedial, I guess. But I'm learning, I'm a rookie, I'm a newbie, and so I'm looking at this and in understanding the town's ordinances and how things were developed. What I'm hearing the citizens say is everyone wants to preserve things, and people moved here for that reason, right? They like the open space, the trees, all of that. And so I'm looking at this and I'm wondering if, and I'm a kind of a rule person. So if the rules were, if the zoning was 2 acres, so why would
the developer come in and propose something that was more Lantana-esque from the beginning, and then come back and give us something that was still not at 2 acres? Like, why did you not choose to develop something that was within our specs to begin with? And that's
Thank you.
it.
That's
Thank you.
an excellent question. So I guess, let's start with Jeff.
I'd like to follow up on that question to the developer.
Mark, real quick, so are you closing the public hearing now?
Unless there's any other comments, we will close, well, there's one more. Dean is back again.
Just to follow up on that drainage question, everything that's on that side of the road comes on our side because we're the only underpiece from Copper Canyon Road from the west to the east. We're the only drainage channel that goes under that road in between those two hills. So we get the bulk of it right now, which feeds down to our pond, overfills it, and then it goes down to our neighbor behind it, which gets it. And you can just come and see basically where we fight the erosion all the time coming through there. So just that. And by the way, our family has been on the place since 1958.
Yeah, I think everybody needs to be aware that we are impacted by our neighbors who weren't quite as thoughtful in their drainage plans when they built their communities, and we had no control over that. So we're kind of stuck, as Ted will tell you, we're stuck with a bunch of problems not of our own making. Sorry, Jeff. Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Wait a minute, one more.
I'm Chris Krause at 1075 Crepe Myrtle Lane. Following up the young lady's question before, is that to the developer, what happens if this doesn't get approved? Because in my simple cowboy math right now, you're trying to get about $4 million more in your residential plan than you would prior. So if that were to happen, then what happens then next? Because then the funding then goes kind of sideways. So yeah, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Okay, then I will close the public hearing at that point, and we'll have a discussion here among the commission. So we'll start with Jeff.
So I have a question for the developer and then a couple comments on the question.
And some of these are rhetorical, by the way. So, go ahead.
So to follow up on Kim's question, and by the way, I'm a numbers guy, so I appreciate the analysis you did here. I hadn't seen that done in Copper Canyon before.
Yeah.
I would like to point out though, that 2 of these developments, for example, Williams Ranch and Vickery, had different zoning requirements, which are much lower.
Yeah.
So it's really not a fair comparison.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah. They were presented as planned developments, right? They were approved.
Understand.
Special zone.
Understand.
So
Yeah. But with that in mind, was there ever a point in time where you considered, since you are grossing over 2 acres, of keeping it all uniform 2 acres so we wouldn't get into a zoning issue with the community?
would you like me to respond?
Sure.
Yeah, because
Please.
this is going to be the crux of the.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. Why would we go through all this trouble when it's already zoned R2? And honestly, yeah, we are grossing 2.
Could I make a point before we do? They're grossing 2, including a 5-acre.
Correct.
site.
That's
not
grossing
grossing
the question.
If you do an average per acre per lot of building lots, excluding the 5-acre, well, I think we're at 1.86 acres per dwelling, which is still higher than Boots Ranch, than Copper Creek, than any of the others that are presented on this list. It's still a much larger lot development. The answer really is economics, and it really is just down to the finances of developing. It is so very, very expensive to develop right now. The costs have gone through the roof. And with home sales and interest rates, it's a challenge. It's a developer's challenge. You might look at it and say, well, why would you want 7 more lots? Why would you go through all of this trouble? Well, the 7 additional lots help make this financially feasible to pull it off. Because as much as it is great to have a 2-acre lot, not everyone, there is a market for people that can live in a 1.5 or 1 acre lot in Copper Canyon and benefit from, from living in this area where there's great schools and a good community. So the answer really to the question is, why are we not just sticking to the regular zoning? It's because it takes the spreadsheet and messes it up for us. And for this development, it makes it very, very difficult to pencil out.
Why the 5 acre? Is there already a?
That's the well site. They're just out, that's it. They've got no choice on that.
Yeah, that's a surface agreement back from
Yeah, that's
many
just-
years ago.
They just gotta live with that, unfortunately.
Okay.
As far as the drainage is concerned, I don't know, Cody, do you have any comments you would like to make relative to?
We'll follow all regulations. You have to study maintenance. There, but there's that possibility for improve as much as we can.
Well, it will affect if this were to go ahead, all those lots along the Lantana side are gonna be very soggy. So you're gonna have to do something anyway, so.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, and our engineers have evaluated the flood plans for drainage, and we might need a separate detention pond, as it was indicated in the email. There is a current existing detention in the center of the property, which would align on one of the parcels that would allow us to have 2 different locations to ensure that we're meeting, we're not causing more problems with the drainage. We're taking care of our own drainage.
All right, thank you.
Any
Jeff,
questions?
any other questions, comments?
No, I'd just like to make a couple, you can take your seat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. By the way, this looks like it'd be very nice development, regardless of where it goes. And I'm coming off a 16-hour direct drive from Charleston, so I'm a little fuzzy right now.
So what else is new?
But I did make some notes, so my brain would be clear. A couple things I just would like to share for consideration. So one is there were some zoning changes made back in 2004 for town center that are still haunting us today. Okay. So, we need to learn from that lesson. And I think clarity and consistency in what we do with zoning is very important. So that's an obvious.
Can you speak closer, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do I need to repeat that?
Sure. You have your mic on? Is it green?
Yeah, it's green. I was just saying that, there was some zoning changes made back in 2004 around town center that, are still haunting us today. It's created a lot of issues. And I think it's important we learn from that lesson, and clarity and consistency in what we do moving forward is really important for the town. Secondly, during the last 2 election cycles, our citizens made it very clear that they want to preserve an urban feel, right? And they want larger sites, and nobody's in favor of down zoning anything, right? Regardless of where the starting point is. They made that very clear during the last 2 election cycles, and frankly, it got pretty nasty for some people. Third, just let me clarify a little bit about the term down zoning, since in my mind, this is a zoning discussion, not a plan development discussion. I mean, if city council wants to go plan development, that's up to them, but we're P&Z and I'm approaching this strictly from zoning, okay? But down zoning, regardless if it's 5-3 or 2-1 or 1-1/3, that's all down zoning, and it sets a precedent, right? Down is down. Regardless of what it looks like on a map, zoning says 2, anything less than that is down zoning. And my 4th point, which, kind of leads me to 2 words, and I'm thinking in my head, precedents and principles. If we make an exception around zoning and down zone, you set a precedent. So in the future, anybody else that comes in front of us is going to point to this as, well, you did it for them. Why can't you do it for me? It's a slippery slope, right? And one, frankly, I don't want to get on based on what happened back in 2004. I don't want to relive that nightmare again. So those are my four points.
Thank you.
So I'll pass the baton.
Mitch?
Yeah, so I had the benefit of being at the development review meeting. And I think there were a consistent set of themes that were shared. as things to address there. And I think that the proposal tonight addresses some of that, but I think there's still a lot that's not yet. And I understand you can't control what happens with the well. The issue really that the town will have to deal with will be complaints from residents, from prospective residents around the noise level, right? I mean, I deal with that at Sonar Street. I'm like, great, we get the same issue, right? And you can take the position that says you bought a property knowing it was there, but that doesn't change the fact that there's still a noise level, right? And it still creates frustration. And we all know we're excited when we go look at a new property, we go look at a new house, and you tend to overlook some of those things in the early days because you see all the shiny new objects, right? I don't know how much as a developer that can be addressed, but it is definitely will be an issue for prospective residents and for the town going forward. The drainage, I think, is the really, setting aside the zoning, because I mean, I think everybody's been pretty consistent on that, but the downsizing. But I think the drainage is going to be the second really big issue. And I think in the first plan I saw you reference that existing detention pond that's in the center. I didn't see it referenced in what I saw tonight in the center anymore. So I didn't know if that was going to be backfilled or what that plan was relative to that. But I think that's another part of the challenge that's going to be out there, right? There's a mental equation that says smaller lots, more hard surface, more runoff, bigger problem, and the town's already struggling with them. So I think those are really, I appreciate going back in and reducing some of the smaller lot sizes. And I understand the economic challenge. And I know that's part of what we talked about at the development review committee is you're bordering Lantana, right? You're bordering this really small lot sizes. And how does that transition work? And it is a thorny challenge, but I think that's going to be the big challenge going forward is, it does set the precedent, but the town, if you went back and looked at the conversations that have happened over the last 2 or 3 years, it started with the town center area, which was where the density issues started. And then how do you one of the big questions is how do you transition that out? And the Williams development was also part of that conversation about how do you transition? How do you manage backing up to estate properties and how does that play out? And I think there's not a great answer, but I think saying, well, we're just gonna make them ones isn't really a good way to get to that because you're going from what is generally speaking in the town 2-acre zoning, right? For the most part, or some larger, but that's sort of the norm to this one. And how do you get to that trend to Lantana? So I think progress, but I'm not sure that if this moved forward that you wouldn't have a room full of residents. And by the way, working with Quiet Hill residents is fantastic, right? I mean, that's absolutely kudos for doing that. And for the Quiet Hill residents coming out and speaking generally in support of it. But I think when you move from here to a city council meeting and you're talking about smaller lot sizes, the room's going to be full. You're going to have 50 to 100 people in here. We're going to have another 3-hour meeting where people are just going to say the same thing over and over again, right? And that's just sort of the world we've been living in. And the challenge is how do we respect what the town's telling us and not continue to sort of perpetuate it. And that's the reason, the mayor in the first meeting said, we're not even going to talk about a super high density, right? Nobody wants to go back to that. The town's been really clear on townspeople and the government, the city government is respecting and trying to hold that. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Deb?
Well, I've got to ditto a lot of what Mitch said. I love the development. I mean, I think it looks like it could be great for Copper Canyon. And the fact that you guys have worked with your neighbors all around, obviously, and the fact that we don't have 100 people in this room fighting it right now is kind of impressive to me. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I also think that this is something that's going to have to, council's got to decide if they're going to allow something more than the 2 acres, because, when I look at this, I've never seen this before. I mean, I know how Vickery Estates got to where they were, and that was a nightmare for all of us. It was terrible. And it took years to get past some of the hard feelings that.
No, they're still here.
You're still
Yeah,
there.
well, but I'm kind of surprised to see the density, the comparison of the acre per home, in 3 other.
Well, let's be clear on a couple things, just for memory's sake. This committee did not approve Williams Ranch. We rejected it. But it went to council, and council, through some very tough negotiating with the developer, decided to approve it. So there, again, I don't want to say that like our opinion isn't important, but we can be overridden, or we can be rejected. We could love something and the council can reject it. So this is not a one-to-one relationship. So when looking at this thing, don't blame us for Vickery or for Williams Ranch. So, and then the other 2 I can't speak to, but I think they were 1 acre, weren't they? You remember?
I don't
I don't
remember.
recall that.
It looks like, you mean they were 1 acre to begin
The
with?
1 acre zone.
1 acre zone?
They're 1 acre zone.
So they were already zoned.
They're already zoned.
Okay, okay. All right.
So again, yes, he's correct in the what he's presenting,
Right.
but it's different.
Right.
It's the same but different.
Well, for me, it's Commissioner Dahl hit the nail on the head. All the points you made are exactly what I was thinking too. This slippery slope, as you said, if we don't stick by what the zoning is, then next thing you know, we're out of control here. We've got to really be careful if we get ourselves in these jackpots like we have in the past. As you said, we should learn by our mistakes.
Okay. I'll kind of echo some of these other comments. One is I was unfortunately out of town and Mitch took over the DRC. I think I would have told you not to come with this plan. This is not something that is in a condition yet that we could reject it or approve it at this point. I think it's got a lot of things that it still needs. And I know you recognize that you didn't spend $1 gazillion putting this together because you knew you might get some responses. I will just tell you my gut feel responses that are not necessarily regulatory. For one is we've had some other developments around town that have come in with let's build a nice square street, put all square lots and make it look like Lantana. And no, what we would ideally like is we would ideally like some nice curving streets that look like they're out in the country with more, frankly, Quiet Hills type odd lots, if you will, something that's more creative and interesting. Now, is that a requirement in the regulation? No, but it sure would be nice. So the whole horseshoe road thing to me is, I just don't like it. Again, not a regulation, but I don't like it. I think and also secondarily, I think we will have a significant traffic problem on Copper Canyon Road. There are times when that road is just jam-packed as it is. 2 entrances just, a few yards apart, you're going to have all kinds of traffic issues, I think, personally. I would, and again, Quiet Hills may not like this, I would have liked to have seen maybe, instead of having a second exit on Copper Canyon Road for fire purposes, because you don't necessarily need it for the number of lots, maybe consider connecting to Trail Ride Lane. But, and I forget, you can tell me, what is the gate that's only open when you really need it? It's not a day-to-day main route. Because I think I understand if I'm in Quiet Hill, I don't want more people coming in through my property, going down Trail Ride, just so I can get on the properties at the backside. So what do you call those gates?
We're just asking for an access gate that's not locked.
Right.
So that's all that is. The gate there just preventing people driving through. But it's just an access for us in case of emergency.
Right. So one thing you could do is just have a single road and connect to them, but put a gate on it so that it's not a major thoroughfare. Again, something to think about. But I will say that the other thing is, and Jeff alluded to this, is the gross lot size don't count. It's a wonderful developer terms. Oh, well, we take a bunch of small, like I was telling my wife, let's take 10 acres. Let's make 4 half-acre lots and 1 8-acre lot. Oh boy, on average, it meets our things. On average, it's 2. No, that doesn't work. So you can take these things to extremes and just kind of discount them. So I think if I would have echoed more strongly, perhaps, the mayor's original comment that this is 2-acre zoning. And we are in a world of hurt if we have to break that, because it will cascade throughout the entire town, developer after developer. Now, I understand the economics. And first of all, I think Janet Awning was a huge asset to this town. And I would love to honor her, and I would love not to make her properties unmarketable. Would really like not to have that happen. I would really love to see something. But you are definitely to be congratulated and thanked for the efforts you have done in making the 2-acre lots around the outside. So I think you've worked really hard on this, and working with the next town over is really nice. But again, I think it kind of meets it fails to rise to the requirements that the town has imposed on us. And I don't know how many of you were here through the Vickery era, but we're really talking about torches and pitchforks at the door. I mean, literally tar and feathers to people. It was very, very painful. The results of that linger now. And by the way, the timing of this is not good because we have an election coming up. And anybody who votes for less than 2 acres, I can guarantee you will not get reelected. So this is so I don't mean to be in politics in it, but it's a fact, because that's what the people of this town have said. To echo Kim's comment, look, it says 2 acres. Why are we even looking at anything with 1 acre? Now, I do understand, and I fully understand why you have 1 acre lots along some 3rd acre lots there at Lantana. It is hard to imagine who wants to buy a 2 acre lot with 6 lots right behind you with kids. Yeah.
6 Lantana houses right now.
Yeah.
On 2 acres.
Yeah.
No problem.
No problem. All right, good. So see, there you go. So yes, I think there probably is a larger market for 1 acre lots and 1/2 acre lots, but there's still, the way Dallas is growing in this part of town and the benefits of being out here, quote, in the country, which used to be when I moved out here. Now it's like in the middle of whatever. I'd like to think that there is a way to make this work with 2 acre, not net, but actual 2 acre lots, and with a more country feel to it. So again, that's just a suggestion. And again, I think accessing Trail Ride Lane might be a way to do that, because you lose one street, so to speak, right? It's one less road you got to build. And obviously there's other things that we would need to see, even if the plan were great, there's other things we need to see, like drainage and the HOA and some other things we would need to see in order for this to be okay, let's send it to council. So in my opinion, this is not a ready for prime time presentation. Great step forward. But hopefully there is some way that this could be rethought in a way that would work for the requirement, and that would meet some of these other drainage questions and fire questions and tree questions, and fence questions, and whatnot. So those are my thoughts. Did anybody else on the commission have any other further comments on my comments? Again, I think you're to be commended for doing a really going all out to try and make this work. So I'm hoping that spirit will continue, and that there's some kind of way we can figure out to get this to work, because it is a beautiful piece of property. It's lovely trees, great location, and it's right next to some really wonderful neighbors. So with that, we've discussed and considered. I do not think we're in a position to make a recommendation to the town council. So I don't know whether we just quote unquote turn it down, or we just table it. Tabling's the wrong word, but no action.
Yeah, I would take that. I would make a decision.
Decision to
It
take.
It won't go to council if you say we
Yeah.
recommend it not.
Yeah, so I'd say.
Could be sort of
Yeah, we could table it to a date certain, but again, I think that puts a ton of pressure on the developer because we're asking for like some pretty major stuff here economically. So I would say, unless there's some motion movement, otherwise I would say we do not recommend this to the town council at this time, but we're open to hearing again. We're hoping for a future presentation.
Can I ask a question? Would it be appropriate at this time?
Sure.
So I just want to make sure, we work with cities all the time. We want that we and with the neighbors, we want this to be, we're working together. So I just want to make sure we understand that the straight zoning is R2, right? The straight 2 acres. So we know the concern with the slippery slope. And then Commissioner, you said that what this is, you would suggest we wouldn't do. Is there a middle ground between what this is and the straight zoning? Is there a middle ground in there? Or is there yeah, so I'm trying to see what you want us to come back to.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, if it's up to me and this commission, I think you heard it better be 2 acres. However, I was also clear that just because we turn it down doesn't mean the town council won't take a different opinion. That has happened. And you've got Williams Ranch on here. Williams Ranch came in here and what they came in with actually did meet the zoning requirements for the town in some ways. In other ways it didn't. So we rejected it, but it went to the town council and several members on the town council really worked hard with the neighbors as well as a developer to change and increase the lot sizes in a number of cases. And then the town council went ahead and approved it. So there's maybe a different risk profile there. They could be more conservative than us. They could be less conservative. They're different people. So I can't say that there isn't a middle ground, but I can say to come through here, I think at this time, we'd really need to stick to the 2 acres because again, I can't tell you how many different projects are coming in the door every day. I don't know, 6, 8 probably that are being discussed. And the first time we say, oh yeah, well, don't worry about that 2 acre zoning stuff. And we'll put 1 acre houses on there, no problem. But it's because there's next to Lantana. Well, I can tell you the next guy is going to say, well, yeah, but I'm next to a road or I'm next to a creek or I'm next to a sewage plant or I'm next to a whatever. And they'll want to change it too. So again, don't mean to say we don't want to be open-minded and flexible. And I understand where you're coming from. And if I'd been proposing it, I'd have done just exactly what you did. But I don't think you're going to find a lot of flexibility in this group for going under the 2 acres.
If it was a math rounding error, and you had to make something work,
Yeah.
it was like 1.9.
Yeah, if it's
nobody's
1.98 or
Right.
1.85 or something like that. But again, the averaging doesn't work. It doesn't work.
I think the biggest eyesore is all these ones.
Yeah.
Right? And somebody's gonna drive through there and see 1 acre and they're gonna go bonkers.
Yeah, I think all of us would be out of a job the day we approve, well, the day after we approve something for less than 2 acres. And I find that regrettable for your sake and for the Ani family. But unfortunately, this is a legacy, as Jeff mentioned, of what we've lived through over the past, 5 years. And I can show you scars, and some of these other folks can too. Deb and I were on opposite sides of the battle. She's got scars as well. So I think it would be not a good plan for us to approve anything less than the strict 2 acres, unless they were like just rounding error kind of things. And even then, I know that'll be the exception next time for everybody. My rounding error is just a little bigger, just a little bigger. But anyway, so that's kind of where I come from. So do we want to take a vote on no action? Not recommendation to the council at this time, but open to hearing again in the future. Any objection to that? No. I'll need a motion and a second.
A motion that we take no action,
No recommendation.
no recommendation on this proposal.
Yes. Second. All right.
On public hearing number 1, could you officially open it and close it?
On the open hearing, number
On
one.
number 1.
Oh, number one, yes. Yes. Okay, so at 7:15 PM on a Monday night, I will open the public hearing for action item number one, which is public hearing item number one. Is there any public comment on action item number one? Hearing none, I officially close it at 1:16 on Monday night. So, I'm sorry, 7:16, excuse me. So I appreciate everybody's comments tonight. I think it's, really an interesting project. And again, I thank the developer for a lot of hard work on this. And I'm just really hopeful that we'll be talking again. So. I hear a motion to adjourn. Second over here. All in favor? Aye.
Hey, Craig.